Let's get to work. The strike is over. Back to work. Hi everyone, welcome on back to the channel. We have the new weapons to get into. Recently, if you don't know, Guild Wars 2 has released a beta for the new weapons for each of the professions. And I spent a good few hours yesterday diving into all the weapons in person through gameplay. And this is going to be my first impressions review tier ranking of all the weapons and which professions they're associated with. Granted, this is a first impressions, okay? And this is my honest reaction. Subjective honest reaction with maybe a little bit of objectivity, like, you know, sprinkled in there. So we're here on the tier maker and we're going to be going over all the professions in descending order from heavy, medium to light armor as they're presented in the character selection screen, which is honestly great for the heavies. As you might be able to see, we have the various rankings of no crumbs. No crumbs were left. We licked the plate clean. The second tiers, it chewed, you know, we chewed. It was good. We were sated. Like, you know, we ate it, but like we've had better. Could be a little bit more exciting. And, you know, push the plate away, meaning I really did not enjoy that, and I think there's more room for improvement. You know, they can spend a little bit longer in the kitchen cooking. Guardian pistols, y'all already know, even from the trailer, from the jump, no crumbs. It is said that Guardian, the blue class, is one of the more favored classes in Guild Wars 2, and with the showcasing of the dual pistols, that sentiment lives on. I gotta say, I really enjoyed it. I think the playstyle of having it be a ranged, mid-ranged condition damage weapon, where you have good access to bleeding, decent access to burning, especially when you loop that into certain trait lines that you take to just empower your burning playstyle, it fits really well. And I love the visuals. I think they're all really good, really clean. I will say, as a slight note from the visuals, the color palette they go with is like a very white, light blue, which does wash out the screen quite a bit. You know, Guardian, Willbender in particular, had a nice dark blue theme, and I was just able to read the screen a lot better. I kind of wish they went and kept in that direction. And I think for certain abilities, the brightness kind of washes out the visual detail of what you might be looking for on screen. Like the second ability, Peacekeeper, it's just like a big white circle in front of you, but not even detailed. It's just like light, and I think if it was shrunk down a bit, it would just read a little bit better. And I think for the final skill, Jurisdiction, the big bright white light in front of the spell circles that kind of are the visual indicator of which charge it's at, that visual could be toned down a little bit so that you could see the visual representation of the charges. And speaking of Jurisdiction and its charge mechanic, I really love that idea. Guild Wars 2 in its alphas used to play around with the charge mechanic, and they scrapped that, which I've always wanted them to bring that back. And I think it works really well. And I also think that charge mechanic would work perfect for mantras, and it's just really cool. I really like it. Moving on to Warrior, because we've got to keep it rolling, baby. Warrior, back to back. And, you know, it's not just because I'm a support main. You know, maybe it's a little bit because I'm a support main. I was not expecting to love Staff Warrior as much as I do. But once again, no crumbs. Right out the gate, two top weapons in my opinion. Now, why I love Staff Warrior is because it feels really dynamic. And it doesn't really feel like it's focused around a gimmick, which we'll get into in a little bit. It is a weapon that gives you a set of abilities to answer situations and to fulfill the role that it is trying to fulfill, that being a more support, bruisery weapon. You got decent strike damage if you probably build it into that a little bit more, but you have very much on-demand healing and regen uptime while being able to grant certain boons like Might and Fury. And it's all around really great. I think the visuals are really good. I really enjoy the spell effect on the second ability, where you kind of create this golden bubble. And I think they should probably lean into that visual a little bit more when compared to the other more blue visuals on this weapon. I think it reads a little too Guardian, And especially with that auto attack, you just have that Guardian Halo effect, which I'm already visually bored of it. It's so 2011. It's so 2011, but it's also just a really busy visual. One ability I want to kind of mention is Line Breaker. Its third ability, which is that dash, where you can dash to an enemy target. It also has an ally target ability, which is actually really satisfying to use. It's a really strong heal, and it gives some good effects, like some supportive boons. And it also provides the unblockable effect. So people have mentioned World versus World. That's going to be really exciting. That's going to be really interesting. And I usually don't think that having one ally target ability on a weapon set works great, because if it's just one out of the many abilities, it feels like it's kind of out of place and it's not really meshing into the kit. I think Warrior pulled it off with this one, I gotta admit. Because sometimes I like to, you know, retarget to an ally and get that really big heal off. And I think that's one thing with ally targeting abilities that you have to do. If you're deciding to change targets to an ally, it better pay off. Because as it is right now, they haven't really ironed out the system of ally targeting to make it seamless and useful in most situations. So, you know, maybe they'll expand on that a little bit. I really hope so. I think they should, especially if they continue to add these abilities. But I really love Staff Warrior. I think they really hit it out of the park on that one. Speaking of hitting things out of the park with a baseball bat, we got Revenant. I gotta push the plate away, Mary. I gotta push the plate away. You know, the first thing that you do is you kind of scroll over the tooltips, okay? And when the tooltip itself is reaching the very top of your monitor screen and you're reading a novel, it's getting to be a lot with certain skills and certain abilities. And the way that they are currently tuned is just not there. The length of the tooltip is more overwhelming than the skill itself. And I think that's a bad thing. If your tooltip is more overwhelming than the skill's effect, maybe you should rethink the tooltip and or the skill effect. I don't love that it's 300 melee range, with the other two abilities being ranged attacks. I really think there was great opportunity there for them to just lean into a ranged scepter, and they went with this stiff melee. And even in action, I played it on an Asura. Their animations, you know, their height gives them a little bit of a disadvantage, but it was like clipping into things. It just didn't read super well. It was a little weird. But granted, it's just Asura. But on the other characters, it really didn't speak to me. It just kind of felt like a sword. So that was a little disappointing from like the consumer standpoint of something different. But when it comes to the second ability, it's actually okay, I think, because it is on a very short cooldown of 5 seconds. So you are able to get like that continuous rolling barrier for the most part. The second ability, Blossoming Aura, I don't mind. However, I do think it should have an ally target feature and functionality. And that's one way they could kind of play into that, is in terms of ally targeting versus enemy targeting on this weapon in particular, because I think it would just add a little bit more flexibility. But I also think that they could add an ally target ability and functionality to the auto attack, so that playing a support Scepter Revenant, you could lean into that a little bit more and have that, you know, synergy amongst the kit. And that also goes for the third ability as well, because that is the only ability, technically on the set, that you can actually target an ally. But if you target an ally, you're not really getting anything out of it. You then have to go and do your auto attack chains. But if you're in a situation where you just want to have that going, all you're getting is very minimal might, and it's an energy drain as well. So, you know, you have this nice permanency so that you can have it up, linked, ready, and then go into a fight and start to power it up, and then use the flip over ability to then teleport. It's a very big skill. It's a very, you know, beefy skill in terms of the things that it does, but there's a lot going on, but it's not really hitting the mark on a few of its things. The melee functionality, things like being at range still, but that's that on that. Next, let's talk about Ranger Maces. I must say, it was a little you know, like it had a little flavor, but I was very surprised because leading up to it, they were like, oh, Ranger got dual maces. Ranger was like, the main hand mace is going to be your support option for people who want to play like a melee support. I didn't get that. I really didn't. It was very minimal support. I think the auto attack chain just giving vigor as a boon, it needs a little bit of healing. I think that final hit should do like 150, 200 healing, just something to continue to sustain the target or your ally targets. The vigor is great. I think that's actually a really strong boon to have in most scenarios if players recognize the value in dodging, so that's cool. But then you have your second ability, which is your only real healing ability for the dual maces, and that's okay, that's fine. But I do think it's really interesting that there are like different radii and range indicators across these weapons, because I think it's like 300 radius, but then other attacks are 360 radius or 240 radius, and it's just once again showing like the discrepancies between like why certain skills have a certain radius threshold when other skills have a much larger radius and or range threshold. And you know, there are certain abilities on this where I'm like, okay, that's cool. I think the offhand is really solid, but the main hand I think needs some work. Add some healing to the final hit on the auto attack. The second, I think the second ability, the healing could be maybe a little bit bigger of a radius, because I think it was only 180, but that might just be the attack. And for the third ability, Oaken Cudgel, where it's a leap and it provides protection to allies around you, I think if that also provided a minor amount of barrier, just so you can really lean into that support element. Next, let's talk about Thief Axes. I just was so bored. Mary, I was so bored. I'm so sorry. It just, I was playing it, and then I forgot I was playing it. And it almost feels like an environmental weapon. Does that make sense? Like it's all surrounding this, the gimmick of the mini game of you're throwing out axes and then you recall them. Even between the different, you know, offhand weapons, because Thief, depending on your offhand weapon, that third ability is unique. It's all just kind of the same. It really is. And even visually, it's all really the same. And, you know, the numbers might be okay, because I was like feeling like I was able to kill things with my condition playstyle. Like I was, you know, able to operate in the open world and kill things and at a decent rate, I felt. It was a bit weird. I feel like they could have just synthesized the idea of throwing out axes and then recalling them onto a target into one singular ability, like on the third ability, where you have a flip over skill to recall it. It just, I don't know. And the way that you throw them out, I think they get thrown in a straight line and they don't hone in on a target. And I swore I had an enemy NPC like strafe a little bit and it completely missed them. And I was like, oh, that didn't feel great. I was just bored visually and mechanically. I was like, for it to be spread across all of the abilities, I was like, this could literally just be one attack. Yeah, I think Thief, I don't know what they could do. It just might not be the weapon for me. I attest. It just might not be the weapon for me. Next, let's talk about Engineer Shortbow. Okay. I really want to push the plate away, but I'm also like, I'm gonna push the plate away. But there's a little bit of like, okay, I see that there was more effort put into this. Once again, you get the issue of the tooltips being more overwhelming than the skills themselves and like their actual effect. I think that the short bow is essentially Necromancer Staff 2.0, and I like that. I do appreciate that there is some extra thought as to what you are detonating and how it's going to influence the other detonations of your arrow essences. So that's cool. Once again, the feeling of it, the auto attack is also a little strange because you have to hit multiple targets to get that additional condition out of it, which I think is like a weakness. It's not a damaging condition, but in most scenarios, in boss scenarios, I should say, you're only going to be striking one target. So it was I just didn't really think about it too much. It didn't really grip me. Visually, they're all just pulling from other profession magic effects. I think if Engineer just had its own bespoke visuals of how Engineer would kind of harness raw magic and have it being like an orangey golden with like a dark blue hue, and it was like alchemical in nature. But it is what it is. I was not impressed. It did feel kind of kit-like. It felt very staff necro-like. So that's how I felt about Engineer. Next up, Ellie Pistols. You know, okay, Ellie Pistols, they chewed. They chewed. I'm not gonna lie. Not gonna lie. I did enjoy my time, my first impressions with the Ellie pistol, but I still don't love the mechanical, mini game attached to it. It's not bad, and it's not super difficult to get used to, but it almost feels like, I don't know, it doesn't feel important or impactful enough, and I'm being honest, it feels kind of Weaver Catalyst-like in terms of collecting orbs, and there's even a potential if you have all the orbs, you essentially use a grand finale. And this was the weapon set where I was like, can we think of something else for Ellie? Can we do something a little different? Why does Elementalist always have to be like Giga 5-head, Einsteinian levels of thought, a think tank? It does what it is searching to do, which is be that condition damage playstyle for Elementalist. And I think it does it well. The burning is good, fire attunement is fun, water attunement is fun. I love that water attunement is actually a pretty good damaging option for access to bleeding and chill. I do enjoy that. Air felt a little meh because there isn't really a condition playstyle that you can go with that. I think they could go with confusion. Confusion could be actually really strong in PvP. But I think air, in terms of pressure, you're kind of pressurizing the enemy and you're confusing them. Overall, it's on a good path. And I think with a little bit more fine tuning and a little bit more finalization of some of the art and sound effects, it'll be really good. And that's why I think it chewed. That's why I do think it chewed. Now, let's talk about Necro Swords. Okay? And it's towing the line of pushing the plate away and But I think I'm gonna place it at okay? Visually, I really like it. I really like dual sword Necromancer. And I think visually, in terms of the spell effects, they're okay. I will say, let's do something a little different other than those vampire bites. But granted, the fourth ability, I think Harrowing Maelstrom and then Gorman dies. That giant vampire bite, really cool. I actually really love that. But visually, it's okay. Mechanically and effectiveness, that's where I go, what are we doing here? Because it's like a strike damage weapon, mid-ranged cleave. It felt a little slow. The auto attack does feel slow. I think the auto attack was not as slow. Maybe reduce some of the aftercast, or take that 3/4 of a second final hit down to a half a second. I think that would be nice. So some of the cast times felt a little weird. It just felt a little slow, and I think for that slow-paced momentum, it wasn't hitting as hard as I think it could. And that also goes for the mechanic of the dual swords, because what you can do is use your ability and then it will flip over to another ability where you will sacrifice health to then do another effect. Those sacrifices should be impactful if you are losing something as precious as health. Granted, for Necros, it's not that big of a deal most of the time because you got shrouds, but they should still feel impactful and worthwhile. They really didn't. They didn't feel as strong. Like that second ability, Satiate, even the base damage didn't feel strong enough to, warrant that loss of health at 50%. Or when you're above 50% hitting an enemy, and if they're below 50%, it does even more damage. We got Gravedigger. We have Greatsword too, which does not consume health, and it resets the cooldown, and that hit is so damn strong. So when you're just comparing the two weapons, there's no matchup because Greatsword automatically wins. And it's cleave, so melee cleave, granted. But I think it just needs to be a bigger payoff for those sacrifice skills. And when it comes to its playstyle, I see there's a potential there. And I'm like, could you go like a Condi Reaper line because of the chill access? I think if there was another bit of chill on here, it could be exciting. The one thing I don't really understand is why there's a leap on this weapon kit for the third ability. It is a ranged weapon, so why would we be leaping into targets? I think if it was instead an evade, or you evade back and leave like a big burst at your location, that could be a little bit more interesting. The leap does not make sense for ranged kits. I don't know why they do that, really. It's not the worst thing. I just don't understand why it's there. Let's move on to Mesmer Rifle. She chewed. I'm not gonna lie, she chewed a little bit. There's a little bit of... There's some flavor there. There's some flavor there. But much like Elementalist, I think there's a little bit more refinement that needs to be done to really solidify it in its role. I really enjoyed playing the rifle for Mesmer. I thought it was a little slow on the auto attack. I do enjoy that you can target an ally, but once again, ally targeting needs to be fulfilling if you are going to interact with the clunkiness that can be ally targeting. Because we can't really adjust the UI, and the way that your ally targeting works, it doesn't prioritize low health targets. You'll oftentimes target clones that have already shattered and are disappearing, but in engine, they're still there. It targets NPCs, it targets mining nodes. I think if they did some more streamlining on how that ally targeting command works, it would be a lot easier for players. But I do like that it is an option, but I think it should be doing more healing if you're targeting an ally. That makes sense to me. I do like that when you are hitting an enemy, it will still heal allies around. I think that is always good to have and should still be there. And as for the other abilities, the second ability, Journey, felt a little slow. And I think for that slowness didn't really feel as impactful. So I think they could just tune the numbers up a little bit and or increase maybe like the aftercast or the detonation of that effect. The third ability I really liked, that orb. If you let it detonate by itself, it just gives boons. If you detonate it itself, it does more damage and it heals, but you don't get those boons. So there was a little bit of decision making with that skill. It's on a short-ish cooldown. I think it could be like 10 seconds. I think it's at 12 right now. But as for the Phantasm is where I really felt there could be more to that ability. That was the one skill where I was like, well, this is boring. It's basically just a sniper shot. It does damage and it will stun your target. But with this being a support weapon, I have that idea of lean into that support. Lean into the ally targeting feature as well. I think if the Phantasm could target an enemy and do its effect, that'd be great. But if you could actually use this on an ally in content to get a really big burst heal, maybe like in a line that pierces, that would be really nice. And then of course the Phantasm would shatter, and if there's an enemy in the area, the clone will start attacking an enemy, as it already does with the second ability, Journey. So I think if the fourth ability, the Phantasm, was a little bit more exciting in terms of it, you wanted it to do that CC, or if you wanted it to do like a really strong heal, a linear heal, maybe it applies a boon like protection, something like that, I think that'd be a little bit more interesting and a little bit more exciting. But then as for the fifth ability, it's resistance and it creates a portal. That was good. It was fine. I didn't really find myself using a portal in PvE settings because, you know, it also increases the cooldown, but like I think that is primarily for group content situations where there's a little bit more coordination going on. So overall, I think that this Mesmer Rifle was a really good weapon. I think they could just, you know, smooth out some of those edges a little bit in terms of timing, in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, and then maybe add a little bit more flavor to the Phantasm skill, and I think you'll have a really good support weapon for Mesmer. Yeah, everyone, that was like kind of a long video of ranking all of the new weapons in terms of first impressions. That's where I currently am sitting with. I'm not really, you know, taking into account a lot of like the benchmarks because I haven't benchmarked anything. I haven't seen any benchmarks of like what they can do really, but more so just first impressions, if it is enjoyable, if it makes sense. I am noticing that the weapons that I actually enjoyed the most did not really have a gimmick to it, or if it did have a cool little interaction within its weapon set, it was usually, you know, kind of very generalized like the symbol for the Guardian. If you shoot through it, it ignites the bullets. You don't really have to think too much about it. You know, you're already doing all of that stuff, so it's very fluid, it's very seamless. But the things like Scepter, Revenant, where it's all about the auto attack with the range, you gotta change to an ally target with that one ability. The second attack, it's a little clunky, it didn't really feel as great. The axes just felt boring because it felt like you could just make that one ability, but it was a whole weapon set. The mechanic of placing the arrows for Engineer, didn't really love that. Didn't feel as impactful in my playtime with it. I was like, it just felt like it was okay. Mace Ranger, it also has that effect of, you know, you get stronger. That honestly was so forgettable. Was so forgettable. But I think Mace Ranger, the main hand, could be a little bit more improved in terms of its support capabilities. Sword, Necromancer, would really love for that sacrifice to be a little bit more exciting and for the power to be a little better. Maybe apply some more conditions like vulnerability, maybe a little bit of bleeding, just something to cover so you can do some damage while you're like doing those slow cast times. And as for the pistol and the Mesmer rifle, I really loved those. I think they're on a really good track with that. A little bit more tuning, it'll be really great. And then Guardian and Warrior really just, they took it home. They ate. They really did. They really did. And I'm really enjoying this beta. I'm going to continue to play it and experiment and play around with it. Thank you all so much for coming on by. Leave the comments that you want to comment down below in that comment section, because I want to see how you all are enjoying these weapons. Which was your favorite? Which one was your least favorite? And which one were you unexpectedly like surprised by? You were like, oh, I was not expecting to love that as much as I did. But I do. And for me, that's kind of Elementalist pistol. I was like, oh, I was a little surprised by it. But thank you all so much for coming on by. Like, comment, share. And I'm gonna go be a Discord kitten. Okay, bye.